The waiting game for Russia's final position on the ceasefire proposal continues. But some intriguing indicators are emerging to suggest that the Kremlin may be preparing to enter a more hostile phase with the Trump administration. The main event is likely to come next week. President Trump's special envoy, Steve Witkoff, told CNN that he expects that there's going to be a call between the two presidents in the coming week. This was after talks that he had had with Vladimir Putin on his visit to Moscow, which he said went really well. Which, of course, is what they say after every meeting and therefore means absolutely nothing. And with Russia playing the ball on the ceasefire as close to the wire as it can, there are signs that it is at least laying the groundwork for this to go completely south at some point as it keeps pushing Trump for concessions. So we can take note of two indicators. One, and this is contested, so it may not be true, was the report that Trump's envoy Witkoff was kept waiting up to 8 hours before he finally got to meet with Vladimir Putin. On the one hand, it's the sort of thing Putin has been known to do. It's a typical power play. Not one you would expect if he was returning Trump's overtures in a suitably cuddly fashion. On the other, Trump himself went onto social media over the weekend to deny in his usual colourful way that any such wait took place at all. Well, on the one hand, he might be right. The media are often overly keen to pick up such things and to misrepresent them as being significant. On the other hand, Trump is, after all, a lying liar who lies a lot, so that does somewhat diminish the power of his denials in the absence of any other information. But there is an intriguing second indicator to add to the possible disrespect that such a delay might have signalled. And that is a shift in tone with the Russian state media over the last couple of days. Generally, the political messages and discussions on Russian TV reflect the Kremlin line, or at least exist within the spectrum of approved debate. In the last couple of weeks, and especially since the Oval Office meltdown with Ukraine's President Zelensky, Russian state TV has been glowing about Trump. The Trump viewpoint is so aligned with Russia's, it says. Trump is now much more of an ally to Russia. The TV presenters were beside themselves with astonishment at the shift in America's position and apparent loyalties. But in the last couple of days, that has changed. This from the YouTube channel Russian Media Monitor, and hat tip to Professor Gerdes explains for first drawing attention to the shift. In the latest video, Zakhar Prilepin starts to detail how Trump's MAGA movement should not be trusted. Would that be because they're still too Western, likely to fall back behind Ukraine, you might think? Well, not exactly. But instead because with all the various players like Elon Musk and Steve Bannon sig-heiling and playing to the far right, basically he says they are just too much like Nazis. So Russia now distrusts the US because it's too much like Nazis. Truly a surreal moment we are living in. If we actually do live in a simulation, something seriously just went wrong with the programme. He went on to say that Russia should stick by those allies that have been supportive and loyal to it in the past. So China, of course, but also the BRICS countries. And this followed several other presentations by different commentators expressing scepticism about Trump, particularly scepticism about his ceasefire proposal. Now, what appears on Russian TV is not the direct word of the Kremlin, but this is such a marked shift from the previous messages, it clearly means something. You'll recall that previous message was Trump's America is great. America that we used to say was the devil really was very benign in history, unlike those dastardly Europeans. But now, yeah, they're benign if you don't mind the whole Nazism thing. I would suggest that the switch doesn't necessarily mean that the official line of the Kremlin is about to turn hostile on Trump. But one thing we know about Putin, which I covered a couple of years ago in my video about how he sees the world, is that he plans in terms of contingencies. He is pushing his luck with Trump, so he wants the ground pretty well prepared should he nudge a little too far and find the full Trump bombast machine firing in his direction. Talking nicely about Trump is fine, but if he suddenly starts calling Putin all sorts of names and disparaging him, that would become awkward. Hence, I think, preparing the Russian public for the worst that might be about to happen, all the while from behind the veil of plausible deniability. Now, Witkoff didn't go into the detail of his conversation with Vladimir Putin, but he did tell CNN that they were bridging the gap between the two sides and, quote, "The 4 regions are of critical importance here." That refers to the 4 regions that Russia partially occupies: Donetsk, Luhansk, Kherson and Zaporizhia. Putin has said before that his conditions for peace would include Ukraine withdrawing from the entirety of those 4 regions, which includes territory that they currently still control. As you would expect, Ukraine's President Zelensky is also trying to use this awkward pause moment to continue to try to impress upon the Trump administration that Putin should not be trusted. On Saturday, Zelensky reported a massing of Russian troops along the border of Ukraine's eastern Sumy region, and he said this indicates an intention to attack. I would like all partners to understand exactly what Putin is planning, what he is preparing for, and what he will be ignoring. Again, if such an attack is intended, then that might be the moment that Putin anticipates the potential sudden shift in relations with Trump, thereby requiring the media landscape to be prepared accordingly. Right now, the Trump team is responding to events. The Russian president is driving them. Trump, of course, generally likes it when he is doing the driving and others are being forced to respond to him. But as we've noted before, President Putin is somewhat skilled at this sort of power gameplay, particularly when it comes to the exercise of real power through the use of violence. So for now, we keep waiting this one out. A lot is going on behind the scenes. Next week is scheduled to be when we will start to see some of that take shape and emerge into public view.